your donuts. Alrighty. Hello everybody. I'm a little late this morning, but welcome to Small Biz and Coffee. Let me adjust my camera here. Oop. So you all can see me. It's like really zoomed in. Oh my goodness. I guess before we get started, let me go ahead and see what's going on with my camera. Thank you for joining me live this morning. I'm a little bit late. My son actually came with me today. I didn't expect him to come, but we had a change of plans, so just a tad bit late. So I'm gonna adjust the camera, and I'm really excited about today's live stream. It came to me last week, and this morning I was writing a bunch of, let's see here. I was writing down a bunch of ideas I could talk about for this stream today, so let's see. Okay, I think we're zoomed back out. Cool. This is better. Looking good. All right, so let's get started with today's stream. And again, my screen is very far away from me. So if you are watching live on YouTube, you will see me go out of frame to see these comments. Hello everybody. I have a plan of how to launch. This is going to be a really in-depth one. It's cold in Dallas too. I know, you guys, it is very cold. Well, to us it's cold. It's like low 40s, and the house that I moved into is an old pier and beam house. It's over 100 years old, and last year was our first winter in the house, and we learned that our house is very cold. It has to do with maybe the way it was remodeled, I don't know. But last year we decided to run our heater like we normally did at our other house, and our bill ended up being $600. So because this house that we live in has a lot of windows, maybe it's because it's pier and beam, so the floor is cold. This year we're trying to figure out different ways how to stay warm without a $600 a month bill. But one thing I was thinking is getting a wood stove. I think that would help so much. I don't know if it's going to happen this winter because those are kind of pricey installations, but if you have a wood stove, let me know how it does for your house. I'm thinking of getting one because I think that would cut back on our bill. And plus, I still have some a little PTSD from the winter storm. If y'all live in Texas and you remember, like, that winter storm took out so much electricity over the grid went down. Our electricity was out for 4 days, and then it was crazy. So I'm trying to get a little bit more prepared. So even though we live in Texas, I think you should probably still prep for like winter disasters, because it's definitely a possibility. So good morning, everybody. Now my son is in the other room. He promised he wouldn't come in here, so we'll see, but he just might, so we'll see. But yeah, so welcome to Small Biz and Coffee. This is a live stream podcast, and if you are not able to watch live on YouTube, I will repost this within a day or so, and you can listen to it on Spotify or Apple podcasts. So that is another way you can listen to the stream. All right, now with that said, let's get started, you all. So today's live stream, I'm opening my notes right now. This topic came about because, let me find them. So this topic came about because last week I made some decorations for my, for the business, for the storefront. And I made these fake food decorations. And it's kind of crazy how this whole thought process came about. But when I made these decorations, I was like, why did I not think of this before? Because one of the reasons that I really didn't fully enjoy Christmas was because I never saw the decorations that I wanted in the stores. So I'm a very quirky kind of, I like, really fun decorations, and sometimes those can be really expensive. So I would never go out to the store and really look for decorations because I knew the things that I wanted were just going to be so expensive. So just last week, I had the thought of, why don't I make the decorations? So my ideal Christmas would be like almost living in a gingerbread house idea. So I wanted fake food decorations, like oversized lollipops and gingerbread man. And the only reason I thought about this was because my storefront. So with my storefront, you kind of have to decorate for the holidays. With a house, you can, it's not like necessary to decorate your house. So with my house, I would usually just do the typical traditional Christmas decorations, but I was never really happy with it because even though, yeah, it's cute, it was never really what I wanted. So with the store, I was like, well, I'm just going to do what I want. And then when I was making these decorations, I was like, how come I've never thought before to make the decorations that I wanted? Trust me, this is going to get into the plot of the whole podcast. We're talking about how to fear of launching a business. And so I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, I've never thought to make these decorations before, and it's a lot cheaper to make them. So I actually left them in the car. I was like rushing in here. I was going to show you on the live stream, but I made out of air dry clay these fake donuts, and I also made cupcakes, and they look really realistic and cute, and it's exactly what I wanted. And every time I would find decorations like that, they'd be like $20 for one ornament or something. And when you have to fill up a Christmas tree, you're like, that's quite a bit of money. So when I got to thinking, I was like, why did I never think about this before? Like, in all of the almost 33 years I've been alive, why have I never thought of making my own Christmas decorations? And it really, I started thinking back all the way to my childhood, and I was like, well, I've never been exposed to creativity or crafts. When I think about it, I've never, growing up, I've never had that exposure. And I think that also goes for a lot of different things, in your life. So When I was growing up, like, when it comes to like socioeconomic factors, when I was growing up, it was very practical. So my mom is from the Philippines. That's where she was born and raised. And she didn't come to America till she was like 19 or 20. And she raised us pretty much by herself. So a single mom, and we lived very like, everything had to be practical. We did not have a lot of money, very low income. There'd be times when we really didn't even have money for food, so we'd go to the food pantry and things like that. So we really did not have money for craft supplies. So when I was growing up, she had to work a lot, and I had 2 other siblings, so it's 3 kids. So she was working, and we were kind of like latchkey kids, so we had to depend on each other to get to school, go home, cook. And I remember always wanting to do different activities. So I would ask her, hey, could I do martial arts class? Or could I do gymnastics? Or could I do this? But we never had the money. So I was never given art supplies. I was never in a household where we sat down and did like crafts together. So through my whole adult, like even as a teenager, I was 16 years old, and as soon as I turned 16, I was working full time. So I don't know if this is like at every high school, but at my high school we had the what was that called? The work program. So if you had a full-time job, you can come in and to the work program and be like, this is my job. You show them that you got hired full-time. And you would get out of school early to go to work. So I was in the work program. So even throughout all of high school, I was AB on roll, did what I needed to do, took care of my business. I was very mature for my age. I was really on my own. So I was riding the bus to school. So I did not have a car. So it'd take me like 2 hours to get to school from there and back. And then so I went to school from like 7 a.m. high school, and I would get out at 11 so that I could go to work full time. And I would get out of work at 9, go home, do my homework or whatever, and then go back to school. So in that time period from child all the way to like graduating high school, there was no time for crafts, activities, paying for craft supplies, things like that. So I was thinking about it, and I was like, I never, from being a kid to graduating high school, because as soon as I graduate, then you have to go find a better paying job, right? So it wasn't until my late 20s where I learned about craft supplies, which is crazy. So I did crafts in school, and sometimes for Christmas I would get those little arts, those little, what are those, pencils and paints and stuff. But I never knew that air dry clay really was a thing. I may have seen these things in, the art supply store, but I didn't know how to use them. And back in the day, like, when I was a kid, we didn't really have YouTube. So I was never really exposed to these things. So in my head, I never thought I could make my own ornaments. And so when I made these ornaments, I was like, these are so cute, and they only cost me like $1. Why have I never thought about this? And it was because of how I was raised and grew up. I was never exposed to arts and crafts or anything like that. I always associated arts and crafts with school. I never thought that you could do them outside of school, basically. So I started having these realizations, and I was like, this could apply to many different aspects of life. And then I was thinking about also my husband kind of grew up kind of the same situation as me, and he didn't know how to, like, when we got together, he really wasn't confident with cooking. Like, he never in his mind thought that he could go cook something. So he would cook and stuff, but it was never like risk taking or like, complex things. And when I told him, like, I grew up cooking because, again, I had to learn how to cook, right? So I'm very comfortable cooking in the kitchen, but he grew up where his grandma and people like that cooked, and he never was given the chance to cook. So he knows how to cook, and he never thought that he could bake. So he's actually a really good baker, and then he didn't realize this until his 30s that he could bake. So he's baked macarons, cheesecakes, all sorts of things, and he's pretty good at it. And because he wasn't given the resources when he was younger, he never even thought, like, it never even crossed his mind. The same with me in crafting. People would tell me I was creative all the time, and it just never crossed our minds that we could do these things because we weren't given the chance when we were younger. So let me look at some of the comments here. You're super creative too. Yeah, people would tell me that growing up. And I remember even like in 5th grade, we were given a writing assignment from my English teacher in 5th grade. And I just did the assignment. I was like, okay. And she entered it into this like citywide competition in Dallas, and it was called Breaking Barriers, and it was a contest about, and I really wish I would have had this paper because I knew I wrote about perseverance, and it really applied to like what I just told y'all, basically like my childhood. And I don't remember what the paper said, but the paper ended up winning the grand prize, and I got to meet, and it was the Breaking Barriers contest. I don't know if it's still around, but it's hosted by Sharon Robinson, which is Jackie Robinson's daughter. And that paper won. And, you know, even in like another grade school thing, an art competition, I got like 2nd place in that. And I never knew that I had like a creative mind or whatever until later in life. So I was like, people would tell me that all the time, but I didn't know what that meant. They would say, you're creative. And I was like, okay. Like, I just thought it meant I knew how to, like, I don't know. I didn't know what it meant because it's never been reinforced in me until, like, I was an adult and I was actually thinking, like, okay, maybe I am creative. Like, I think of different things and I can put them into reality. So it's just very crazy how different socioeconomic factors can determine how you think you're able to do something. It's very interesting. And this is not science, by the way. This is just what I've been thinking in my head, and it relates to me personally. So I'm not like backing this up in any way. It's just my personal experience. But and let's see, same here. I was exposed to crafting when you did a video about your journal. Yes. The junk journals, that was one thing that I learned, and it's really fun, and it's kind of yeah, it's just like stuff that's why I feel like I'm kind of trying to catch up with all these different things. I learned how to sew. I wish I had more time. Like, I've learned how to knit. And then this morning I just figured out there's knitting machines. So instead of taking 3 months to knit something, I can use a knitting machine. I was watching a TikTok video and I was like, whoa, there's knitting machines. I had no idea. So sometimes kids grow up and they have like these, you know, if you were fortunate enough to live in a household where maybe your parents had a little bit more income and you could play with these things when you're younger, you could really hone in on certain crafts, you know, and whatever you're interested in. That's why I think it's so important to really nurture the, you know, minds of children and like let them do their thing, because sometimes, you know, especially when you're in a situation where you have to be very practical, like you don't have money, like you could, you know, you have to have your kids, you know, get up and feed themselves because you have to go to work. That's the reality of some people's lives. And I'm going to relate this to starting a business here in a second, but that is just what I grew up with. So it's very hard for me to grasp things that weren't practical, that weren't like quote unquote practical, like going to work at a 9 to 5 and making sure you know, have enough money for dinner and things like that. There wasn't much room to play around with money and, you know, buying supplies and all these things. So yeah, so a lot of people are talking about crafting, paper crafting, fake food. So a lot of people kind of had the same situation as me. And sometimes I talk to other people and they're like, yeah, I've been doing, you know, this since I was a kid. And I was like, wow, that's so awesome. I wish I would have known about this when I was a kid. But yeah, so sometimes you feel like you just don't have the capacity to do something because you've never had an example in your life of how to do something. So like I mentioned before, my mom is from the Philippines. And when she, you know, came here, it was very much like, you know, grind. You had to work and figure out how to make it work. So she's a pretty good cook. So she would cook Filipino food, egg rolls, lumpia, should I say, pancit, and a lot of people enjoyed her food. So even I do have a memory of us living in this apartment complex, very like small apartment complex. And my mom actually learned how to cook soul food too. So she would cook greens, and that was one of her famous dishes. So like greens. And even like a lot of her friends who were in the Black community, they like her greens more so than their own family's greens. So whenever she made greens for like the holidays or something, we would have egg rolls and greens. Like she had to have the greens, right? And I remember her, like her in our apartment complex, she would just have the door open and people would come and get the greens and stuff, right? They would come with their plates, and they used to exchange services. Like, they used to cut my brother's hair because she didn't know how to, fade his hair and stuff. She would cut his hair in exchange for greens. Like, I remember this kid coming in, cutting my brother's hair, getting his plate and leaving. So it was really funny. She was a good cook. And so she had the opportunity to open up a Filipino restaurant. And if you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there's a Filipino community, but there's not a big, there's not really many Filipino restaurants. So I remember growing up, we would actually drive kind of far to any Filipino restaurant we could, and there wasn't very many. So she had the opportunity. She even had an investor. She said one of her friends, and I was kind of young, so I didn't know this until later on in life. So she said one of her friends offered to rent her a space and have this restaurant for Filipino food, because there's a big lack here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so she had, especially back then, 20, 30, 25 years ago, so she even had the name for the restaurant. She had the funding for the restaurant from a friend. And she had the menu, and she was going to call this restaurant the Island Taste. And she knew exactly what she wanted to do with it. But she ended up not going through with it because of the fear. And she had no example of how to start a business here in the US. So she ended up not doing it. And she used to always talk about the restaurant. She's brought it up over the years about how she almost had a restaurant, right? And because she was afraid, different, like we mentioned, socioeconomic factors can contribute to if people are going to start a business, or if they're going to be I'm going to still work at my cashier job because that's safe, and I cannot afford to start a business because if I fail, then my whole family's on the street. So I'm not here to I know sometimes you watch these videos of motivational, how to start a business or fear of starting a business, and you'll be they'll say, oh, well, just get out there, take risks, save your money, get out there and grind, very generic advice. And anytime I've watched those videos, I never get anything from it because it never relates to me, because different people have different situations. So for my mom's example, she could not risk starting a business because she didn't have the time. She was single with 3 kids. Who was going to watch these kids? Who was going to cook dinner? Who was going to get them? We rode the bus, really, but who was just going to watch these kids? Because when you start a business, you're going to be at the restaurant doing these things. So she really weighed the pros and cons, and she ended up not doing it, even with someone willing to pay. So if you're in that type of situation, so different people have different, abilities to start a business. And I'm going to try to read these comments because I see some. I remember when you made the Super Mario jacket. That's so funny that you watched that video, because I feel like nobody watched that video. And initially, before I had a candle channel, I actually had sewing videos, and they're privated on my YouTube now. So I wanted to start sewing. But for some reason I moved to candles because I knew that sewing wasn't going to be very profitable as far as selling products, sewing products, which I could have maybe, but I'm very into sewing. I just don't have time to do it now because of running a business, but I'm very into sewing. So that's very funny that you watched that. You and other YouTube creators are a blessing. Yes. It's so awesome now that we have YouTube, because now we're getting the exposure. So when I was younger, there wasn't exposure to people starting businesses because there's no YouTube. So if you didn't have a family member or someone in your life that started a business, you would be in the dark, because people in the schools I went to, they never taught this. They never taught you, they taught you the practical things you needed to learn. Again, we're talking about being practical. There wasn't very much exposure to entrepreneurship. I never heard that word that I remember in high school at all. There was no classes, from what I recall, about entrepreneurship. So it was very much you're going to learn how to do algebra, you're going to learn how to do pre-algebra, whatever. learn history and stuff, and then you're going to go and they kind of just send you on your way, right? They don't really, I feel like in high school, for me, my experience, I really didn't get nurtured as far as really getting into different areas of life. They don't kind of give you that guidance in my experience. Maybe that's just where I went to high school. But yeah, I did not get that in high school at all. So in my mind, leaving high school, I was like, I literally Googled highest paying jobs. That's what I Googled. And I was like, oh, a pharmacist. So that's what I wanted to go for, because I was like, well, a pharmacist makes $100K. But I had no idea that you could be a polymer clay shop and make 6 figures. And it's totally possible. You can be someone who sells stickers and make 6 figures. Those are things that they don't tell you, like that I didn't get told in school, that you could be creative, you could start your own business and be just as successful as someone who, is a pharmacist. If you have that type of passion or creative mindset for certain things, it's definitely possible, but I wasn't really told that. But now it's really great with YouTube and just TikTok and stuff that you can see. Now you have people that will guide you, or you have that exposure. So that's what's really great. And now you see younger people starting businesses, younger and younger. So even people who are 15, 16, they're nail techs. They're going out and starting their own businesses, which I think is really awesome. Let's see. I'm reading comments. I'm trying to. I need to move this screen closer, you guys. Let's see if I can blow it up a bit. Oh, it doesn't. All right. Some of those webinars are not really helpful. Yeah. And then I thought candles would be my thing, but I really love paper crafting. Yeah, so that's what's also great. Someone said, is it safe to make candles while pregnant? I would say I didn't make candles while I was pregnant, because I think towards the end of my pregnancy, I stopped making candles, but I would think that you would need maybe like the mask to make sure that the fumes aren't bothering you. So like I always forget what they're called, but the little masks that they use when they're painting, or when there's a lot of fumes. So one of those, and making sure there's some good circulation in the room, so keeping windows open and everything like that. That's probably the safest bet. I wish they taught entrepreneurship in high school. Let's see, looking back, I had known how to do a business. Right? If I would have known how to start a business when I was in high school, I would have done it. And what's funny about that is when I was in 5th grade, I kind of did start showing signs of entrepreneurship. So again, I was just trying to figure out different ways to make money, because 5th grade is when stuff really started going downhill for us. We were not, a lot of family things happened, and we were just kind of broke, right? So in 5th grade, I remember it was me and 2 other people, and I told them, I was like, why don't we bring our toys and extra candy, whatever you have at home, bring them to school and we'll sell them on the playground. And so me and these 2 other kids did end up doing that. And I remember at one point I had a duffel bag, and I'm not sure why the teacher let me bring this to school. Again, this was like 30 years ago, but I had a duffel bag of candy and toys, and then me and the other 2 kids would sell them, and I kept the money in like this tin lunchbox. So even in 5th grade, I was very like, oh, how am I gonna make this money? Which is not good. But I remember we made like $30 or something, but it was kind of my start to starting a business. But again, at that time, I didn't know. And I think if I would have known in high school, I probably would have started a business in high school, if I would have had access to that. So yeah, so with hearing that story of how I grew up and kind of my mindset, and how my mom shied away from opening her business. Starting a business, there's different factors for everybody. So even though now we are in 2022 and we do have equal opportunities to start a business, that doesn't mean that the world is a fair playing field, right? There are some people who may have grown up with family members who maybe owned a business, maybe they owned a bakery or some type of business. And when you get exposed to that when you're younger, maybe your concept of starting a business is different from someone like me or other people who have never been exposed to that in their community. So if you had that kind of exposure growing up, you would know what profit and loss was. You would probably know how to open up a storefront or what things you would need in your kitchen if you were to have a business. And just by having that exposure, it really does change your mindset. And so maybe people who've had business owners in their life, it's probably not easier per se, but they have more knowledge of how to get to where they need to go to start a business. Maybe they have a little bit more confidence when it comes to starting a business because they've seen it firsthand. So even though, like I said, yeah, everyone can really start a business, but it really does depend on your community, where you grew up, social factors, economic factors. Are you a marginalized community or not? So that's why I think it's really important on realizing that and what's your situation. And once you figure out what your situation is, then you can say, okay, how can I tackle this? And how can I achieve my goals with where I am now? So instead of saying, everyone can do it, let's go, it's not like that, to be honest. If you're born and you have inherited, a house, you know how amazing that would be if your parents or your grandparents left you property. If your grandparents had, 5 properties or something, because, sometimes old people there's just like, sometimes they just have money. And especially back then, it was, some people just grew up with different opportunities, right? And you know how inflation is now. So if your parents or grandparents left you a house and you just inherited 50 grand, right? That would give you a lot better chances of starting a business. You'd be a lot more comfortable with that kind of opportunity, right? So it just really depends on where you're at in life and how we can proceed from there. Let's see. Someone said I would sell my little notebooks on the sidewalk, right? You would sell your notebooks on the sidewalk. So I think sometimes we have that feel for entrepreneurship, especially when we're little, but then people, if you don't hone in on it, or if your parents don't see that, and it's kind of hard to start figuring out what to do next, right? So what's really great is, like I said, we have the internet now, which is crazy. So growing up, I would say I didn't really start getting on the internet until I was like a junior or senior in high school, which was a little over 10 years ago. I can't do it because I'm almost 33. So it's really amazing how much the internet has evolved. And I would say we really didn't start using the internet heavily for tutorials until honestly, like 2014, 2015 is when I started seeing like tutorials online. So the internet has evolved like crazy, and now we just have so much access to so many cool things. That's what I love about the internet. And that's why I encourage people to post, because you never know what you can learn from somebody else. So it's not all about just going viral or something. There's so many amazing creators and so many awesome things that I have learned just from the internet, which it gives us so much opportunity, right? So the internet can really help you in finding groups of people that are like you. So if you're a part of, like the trans community, and you're like, well, how are people going to accept like what I'm doing, my business, and what kind of backlash am I going to get? Because nowadays, like, you never know what people are going to react to, because people have different ways that they kind of we're progressing as a country, but still there are a lot of marginalized communities. So joining in with people who are like you, or even like with the Black community? How can I join in with people who were raised like me? Because in different communities, we didn't have different opportunities that may have been available in other places. So coming in with creators or people who are like you can really help. And you won't have to feel uncomfortable or anything. It can just really nurture your ideas. So those are other things that you can do. Or, you know, the Hispanic community or Asian community is just a lot more tips that you can get from people who are like you. And even if you grew up with some type of mental, like anxiety or, you know, depression or things like that, maybe you can join in with people who are business owners with that kind of stuff. So even with me, I am thinking that I have more ADHD tendencies. I've been talking about it a lot more and I've been realizing it. So I'm working on actually getting with a psychiatrist to figure that out. But I Googled, like, it was amazing because I could Google business owners with ADHD, and it was just a lot of the same things that I'm experiencing. So maybe you have ADHD, or maybe you have depression, anxiety, or something like that. That's kind of a different, you know, it's different from someone who doesn't have it. So if you're asking someone who doesn't have ADHD, how do you run your business? It may not work for you. Or if you're asking someone who lives in Highland Park, which is a rich neighborhood, and you live in like where I used to live, North Dallas, like the North, like Dallas, that's not rich. If you're asking them how they run their business and you live in, you know, like a more lower income neighborhood, then it's not going to work for you. So you have to kind of get with people who are on your same wavelength to see what's going to work and what they do, and kind of help you through it. I think that's going to be a lot better. Let's see. Okay. So Tiana, with knowing how to do so many things, how do you hone in on your passion? I thought my passion was candles until I started crafting. Oh, yes. So I definitely know what you mean. You just got to try it. So try it and see what really sparks your creativity. So if you find that you're making candles, and if you start waking up every morning and you're like, I can't stand making these candles, or what's going on because you find yourself doing something else all the time, maybe try different things out. So if you are just kind of starting out and finding what you like doing. So I have kind of a bunch of different passions. I don't think a passion has to be one thing. Maybe crafting in general is your passion. So maybe you're someone who likes to jump from different crafts. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Sometimes I don't want to make candles at all, and I wish I could just do something else. You know what I mean? So like the other day, what was it? I wanted to make my little clay decorations, because I tend to, what is that called? Like hyperfixate on things. So one day I might get super interested in making candles, and maybe another day I might get super interested in making something out of paper, like some type of paper craft or knitting. Sometimes there's days where I will want to do just one thing for those. Like I will want to just knit for 3 days, and I get so into it that I just keep going and going, and that's what I want to do, and then I get tired of it, and then I move to the other thing. So that's just how my brain works. And I don't think, if you like really feel that candles aren't your passion, then just try out different things. And maybe crafting, like I said, crafting could be your passion in general, and maybe you just want to start a craft channel where you can do all the things. So I wish I could just do all the things, because I have this idea, like I always have different ideas for different things, but because of time constraints, I just can't do them. So I've had ideas for videos and ideas for like sewing and stuff, and maybe one day I'll kind of have my life situated to where I can do all the things, because that's what I would really love to do, all the things. So maybe that's what you like to do. Let's see. I wonder if I have ADHD. So I don't actually, I've never been diagnosed, so it'd probably be wise for me not to talk about into depth depth because I'm not actually diagnosed, but I've just started coming to the reality. And I was actually talking to another business owner. She has been diagnosed with ADHD, and she came in here, and she is looking to start her business. And it's so funny how we connected, because she lives in the area, and her and her daughter have a crafting business. I forgot what they do. It's something with beads. And it's so funny because she was like, oh, I was actually going to move in this area to a house around the corner. And I was like, was it a blue house? And she was like, yeah. So we actually had our eye on the same house. And we kind of connected over that because that was funny. And she ended up wanting something different in the end, I believe. But she was like, even a total stranger was like, yeah, I think you have ADHD when I was talking to her. So I don't want to like go in depth because, like I said, I don't think, I'm not diagnosed with that yet. But for me, it's very hard for me. Like, I will just say personally in business, I have to have things on a calendar because it's very hard for me. If it's not on a calendar, I'm probably not going to get it done, even if I do know I have to get it done. So things that are even big deadlines. I remember when I was writing my book. Now the book is done, so that part's done. So I feel like I can kind of talk about this now. Even it's not going to be out till like next year. But when I was writing my book, I would have certain deadlines, and my brain could just not like get to where I was like, I have to get to the computer, but I just cannot physically get to the computer right now because my brain just doesn't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I want to do something else. So I kind of occupy myself with doing other things instead of the things I'm supposed to do. So like procrastinating pretty bad. And there were some times where I would be up like till the sun came up trying to work until a deadline when I had plenty of time to do it. But sometimes it's just hard for me to I really have to be very, very strategic about how I use my time, because I will get distracted and do other things, other shiny things that I feel like, oh, I think I should do this instead. That's just what I feel like doing. But yeah, I'm pretty bad about that. And so I'm trying to be better, because if you ever see I like people who upload every week on YouTube. There was a point where I could do that, and I really do think in the beginning when I started YouTube, I think I was very hyper fixated on my business, and that's the only reason I was able to do a lot of the things that I did, because I was very focused. Like, I could do it from morning until night, and this was before I had a child, so I had the time. Like, I could go on the computer, sit on it till morning, and then until night. So but now that's something like I only work 4 to 6 hours now because I have a child now. But that's just my experience with business. And going back to, let's reel it back in, right? What were we talking about? We were talking about launching a business. So different factors can contribute. So let's not sugarcoat it and be like, oh, we can all get out there and do it. If Sally had parents who were willing to give her $10,000 to start a business, and you don't, then we're going to be on different playing fields, right? So like I said, just reassess where you're at in life and then go from there. So here are some things that I did when I started realizing that I can start my business. Here's what I did, because I kind of have always been a little bit of a risk taker naturally. That's just how I've always been. So that part wasn't in my brain that, oh, fear of failure wasn't something I was afraid of. But I know that is a lot of people's fear is of failing at something. So if you do have that fear, I will say, if you're afraid that no one's going to buy your things or you won't get any followers or anything like that, just go for it and be very patient. So that's one thing I'm also kind of good at, is being patient, because I know that even though I'm not somebody who's viral or someone who is just all over the place on the internet, I'm going to keep going because that's just what I like to do. So don't be afraid of people not accepting what you're doing. Just go ahead and do it if you like doing it. So if you're afraid of failure, and if your business does, like if you run out of money, you're like, well, this isn't going very well, you can learn from it. So if you can set aside a certain budget and just be like, this is what I'm going to spend on my business, and if it doesn't work, if after a year we don't see any improvement, then you can say, well, what can we do to change it? So if you started your candle business and you're like, well, I started my candle business, but it's been a year, but no one's buying my stuff. So what should I do? You can reassess. I wouldn't even call that a failure. So what you do is reassess, see where you're lacking and see where you can improve, and then go from there. So I don't really think of things as failures, and that's just a way I have always been. I just like doing things. So I've always been the type where you're not going to be good at first. So I know that right off the bat. So just like I talk about with my storefront, I knew off the bat that this store was going to be slow because it takes years to build up a reputation, to learn how to run a storefront. So I knew I would not be seeing great, profit with the store for like maybe a couple years. So kind of set realistic expectations, and just know it's going to take time. So you're going to have to be patient, and you're also going to have to reassess if things are going wrong, and then figure out where to go from there. So things really aren't failures, but you can learn a lot from quote unquote failures. So I've had other businesses in the past, like drop shipping businesses. I had one particular drop shipping business before it really exploded. This was in, I would say maybe 2017 maybe. I was drop shipping like school supplies, and this whole business, like my face was not attached to this business. It was like a school supplies, but it was like cute school supplies. So that was my niche. It was very, it was supplies you wouldn't be able to get in a Walmart. So I remember like there was one month I put a lot of work into it, and I made about $1,000 on it from Instagram, and it really did wash the expense that I paid for like the website and things like that. So I didn't make a profit, but because of that business, I learned how to do a Shopify store. I learned all the little apps in Shopify. I learned about email lists. I learned how like to use Instagram. So even though that business didn't profit, I learned a whole bunch. And the same for when I first started my business in 2015, since I did try out Amazon Handmade in their FBA warehouse, I learned how to use Amazon FBA. So every little thing that you may deem as a failure, you do learn from it. So just think about that, and you'll never be like afraid of little failures as you go. How else can you get over the fear of launching a business? We talked about before, exposing yourself to business. So watching people who are in your industry, who have maybe been in business for a while, and you can learn from them. Reading books. I learned a lot from books, because my thing with money, I don't think my mom ever, because she's from a different country, so when she came here, she never really learned how to manage money. So I never learned how to manage money. And when I was early 20s, I would spend every dime. Like when I would get a paycheck, I would base my day out of from how much money I still had in the bank. So if I had $75 and my bills were paid, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go out to eat, or I have $75. How can I spend $75? That's how I used to operate. And I used to always be at the malls buying things. And I would literally spend all my money. And it wasn't until I read Dave Ramsey, which I really don't rock with Dave Ramsey now, but that book, what was the book called? I don't know, Total Money Makeover. I did read that, and it did trigger my mindset change. And ever since I read that book, I have learned so much about money, and I'm very, very thankful that I read that book, and that book was put into the world, because that really did change my mindset about money. I remember even trying to give it to my parents. I'm like, can y'all read this book? Because I learned so much. I learned because of that book. I didn't learn from that book certain things, but I did get into kind of like a little rabbit hole of learning. So I learned how to budget money. I learned that, oh, I was trained, like not trained, but in my mind to get a car, I always thought you had to get a loan out. I thought that's what you had to do to get a nice car, but I didn't realize you can get a decent car if you save your money and pay cash for it. So I was, because my parents, they always had a car loan, and I just thought that was part of being an adult, of getting a car note, but you don't have to have a car note. So I have had a car note like when I was in my early 20s, but after that I just paid cash for my cars, and I have had pretty decent, like my cars are pretty, they're not new, but they get me from point A to B. I don't have a car note, my insurance is cheap, and that saves so much money. So I learned that, and I learned about, you know, mortgages and all sorts of things just from reading that one book. It really opened up my mind, because again, they don't teach you that in school, and if your parents don't teach you that, then you're never going to learn that. So if you have any thoughts about money, maybe try to solve those problems first before starting your business. That could be a part of your journey, is learning how to manage money. So reading books is a great way to expose yourself to some new ideas and some new ways on how to kind of live your life to where you can kind of fulfill different aspects that you're really wanting to fulfill. So if I would have never learned that, I mean, I wouldn't know how to buy a house. I wouldn't have saved money. I would have saw the money in my bank account instead of saving it. I'd be like, oh, well, what am I going to spend X amount of money for? Because it costs a lot of money to like down payment on a house. Some people, when they see that amount in their bank, I know personally, family members, like if they see that amount in their bank, they're going to spend it all up. So it's very, that's just kind of the society we live in, consumerism and stuff. Like I like buying stuff, don't get me wrong, but I like buying with intention. I don't really go out and buy things sporadically. So learning how to manage money could be your first step if that's where you're at, if you're learning how to do that. Let's see. Your journey sounds so much like mine, which is why I can't read, you guys. I have to move my screen forward because it's so far away. Your journey is so much like mine, which is why I relate to you on so many levels. Yes, you guys. I'm so glad. I'm so glad, because I definitely love giving you all like motivational things, but at the same time, we like to keep it real too, right? So funny. I learned to budget through a cash stuffing video. Those videos are awesome too, because they kind of go back to that Dave Ramsey thing where he talks about cash envelopes. I think he talks about that. I personally don't do the cash envelopes, but it's a great resource to start learning how to budget. So those are great things. Like you can learn just so much from exposing yourself to different things. So what other ways can you get over your fear to launch a business? So maybe you're busy, maybe you're a single parent with a child, you know, maybe find someone on the internet who is similar and see what they have done in their life, and how they started their business. What routes did they take? So if you're a single parent, maybe you're very limited on what hours you can work. Maybe you can't go and, you know, go out and do all these things that other people do because you have to watch your child. So is there something that you can do to start a business online? Some way you can start a business that doesn't involve a whole bunch of time. So just think about different ways you can use your situation, because now we have so much great opportunities out there. Yes, you guys, so we talked about launching, so exposing yourself with books, finding people, and also finding mentors, joining programs that can help you. So this is one thing that I'm kind of new to. So I have used, one of my followers actually told me about SCORE. So SCORE is a mentorship program, and a lot of the the things they offer are free. So check out Score, because I actually did chat with a mentor, and that person did give me some tips. But you can, if your mentor doesn't really vibe with what you're doing, maybe you can find another mentor. So they have a whole bunch of people who come and they will just give you advice, like they've been there, done that. So the mentor that I chatted with, he was an older man, so he's probably in his 60s. He was just chilling, like he had done his business. I think he was a marketing person from what I understand, but he was telling me all sorts of ways. And it's just so crazy, because as you progress in business, you're so, like, you get so much more confident in the new steps. So if you would have told me that in 2015 I would have a storefront, I'd be like, no I don't. Because it costs a lot of money, and I wouldn't have imagined having the money to do this or the confidence to take that risk. But I feel like as you progress, you get a little bit more confidence, and that's what's really crazy about having a business too. And even talking to that older man, like, he was so sure of things that I should be doing. He was I really forgot what he told me, but I do think he told me to write a business plan. And that's another thing that you can start learning, is how to write a business plan to get grants and different opportunities for yourself. So I didn't really think of this either, but that's another way to launch your business. So if you're thinking, well, man, I don't have the money, or I don't have the opportunity, maybe there are people who can help you get there. So I'm at this position now where I'm looking into applying for these things. I don't know really what I'm doing, so I'm just, fly by night kind of trying to learn, writing business plans and sending them in and seeing what happens. I'm not really sure how to do that, but we're gonna see. But you can go those routes too. So if you're feeling like you need a little bit more help, you can find free mentorship, and they can even probably guide you on these things. And if you meet with your mentors regularly, they can show you how to write a business plan, or who you should submit this business plan to, where are the grants, where are those things that I can get help with to start a business. So you don't have to do it alone. You can definitely get people to help you do that. Let's see. All right. Any more comments? Okay. So that is another thing that you can do. And do I have any more tips for you all? So if it's just a general fear of putting your work out there, like I mentioned earlier, just do it. There are so many quirky little things that I have seen people do online that are just so successful. So if I've seen people make, like, just the strangest things that you would have never thought, but then other people might vibe with it. So you never know what community is out there. If you have an idea, just put it out there and then kind of see what happens. And if that's what you like to do, then go for it. There are so many ways nowadays to make an income and make a living, and it might not be a fast process. So that's the last thing I will leave you with, because I think we judge the process and we think that we have to be at a certain point at a certain time because that's what so-and-so did. And if I'm not at this point in a year, then it's a failure. So like we mentioned earlier, everybody has different situations. No matter, you could have a sick family member that you have to take care of, and then the other person does it. For me, I have a child. So the other people who are, who are doing the same thing, they might not have children. So maybe they can do things faster than me. So I have to take into account, okay, I have a child, so I can only work until about maybe 6 p.m. After 6, I can't really work. So if someone else has the whole day to work, they're going to probably do things a lot faster than me. So take that into account, because so don't go off of other people's timelines. If you see progress in yourself, then that's great. Maybe something that took somebody a year might take you 2-3 years. But I mean, we have time, right? Like, well, we say that, but I'm still young. I'm 33. And if I am able to live a long, full life, then I still have quite a bit of time left. So I'm not really, as I'm just doing what I can and what I can do, and that's okay. So don't beat yourself up if you feel like, you're not at a certain point, just keep going, and that will help you get over the fear of launching. Because if you are always afraid that you won't be able to do this or do that, just take it step by step and do what you can. So hopefully that gives you some insight on or gives you some, I guess, confidence about launching a business. And like I said, it's a big deal to launch a business. It's a lot. I don't think we stress that enough. I think with the internet, we have made it seem very easy. And even though, yes, it is more accessible, it's not easy to start a business. So if you are starting a business, just realize you're not doing something easy. It is very hard. And you're taking a risk, you're investing in materials, and you're investing your time, and it is a big overall investment, and you have a lot to learn. So there's a lot of things we have to learn along the way. There's no guidance. I will say, out of all, starting a business, there's no guidance. And even though it is a job, out of all of the jobs, that is the one job where you don't have a bunch of guidance, because you can go to school and be a nurse, and then you do your textbook, you do A to Z, and then you're a nurse. Same, which we get because it's a medical profession. But, if you want to work at, as a waitress, you go and you do training, and they tell you do this and this, and then there you go. So you get your guidance to offer the best service possible as a waitress. But I feel like with entrepreneurship, it's the one job where you can kind of get a guide on how to do things, but you don't have that specific guidance to make it work for you. So just think about that too. It's going to take a little bit longer. It's going to take, your mind might, you have to get in the right mindset. And depending on your situation, you may have to do things differently than somebody else. But that's the one thing about entrepreneurship. So just keep that in mind and don't be too hard on yourself. And I think that if you're very passionate about what you're doing, if you feel like your product or whatever you're doing is going to serve someone else in some way or form, then just try it out. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. It's fine. It doesn't have to work. Maybe you stumble into something else years from now. You don't have to stick with it just because you started it. So that's another thing. If you feel like your business is failing, and it's fine. Like I said, I've failed businesses too. I've failed at the drop shipping thing, and we call fail, we'll say quote unquote fail. The drop shipping thing, I think I tried for a brief second to do blogging. Wasn't my thing. Mom blogging wasn't my thing. I thought I would be good at it, but I was like, I don't like doing this. And it was for maybe 4 months. And I was like, well, I feel like, I did, I could offer some advice to people, because I use cloth diapers, and I made his little food, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this. And I just didn't like it. It wasn't me. If you notice, I don't really talk about my son often. It's just, I don't really talk about being a mom often, because I feel like we have other people to do that. That's their thing. They like doing that, but for me, that's not my passion. So other people may be passionate about teaching others about parenthood and things like that, but that's not my passion. So I think I'm more into crafting and doing things like that. So even if something doesn't work out for you, it's okay. We can move on. We can do other things. It's not a big deal. Life goes on. So hopefully that gives you the confidence to at least try and to see if that works out for you. So if you had any fears about starting a business, and you've watched tons of videos and they just say, just go for it, just do it, put your mind in the right place. It's a lot more than that, let's be real. But hopefully you enjoyed this little podcast, you all. I'm actually a little late opening my store, so I better go and open the store, and I will post this onto, I'll edit it a bit and post it onto my streaming platforms, so you can listen to it there as well. But thank you all for joining me live, and hopefully this helped you out, and I will see you on the next podcast. Bye.